The rain fell relentlessly on Jennifer's car window as she drove down the deserted road that gloomy night. Drops of water hit the windshield hard, distorting the view and making the trip even more challenging. Jennifer was alone on the dark road, and her only company was the monotonous sound of the engine and the rain. She had decided to make the overnight trip to visit her parents, who lived in a neighboring town. She hadn't seen her family in months and missed them terribly. However, bad weather made the long and lonely journey even more challenging. The road wound through a dense forest, with tall, imposing trees that blocked out the light of the stars and moon. The car's headlight was the only bright spot in the darkness, illuminating the wet road ahead. The atmosphere inside the car was tense, with Jennifer gripping the steering wheel tightly while keeping her eyes fixed on the road. To try to alleviate the feeling of loneliness, she decided to turn on the radio. However, upon turning the knob, instead of the soft music she expected, she was met with loud, distorted static. The music seemed distant and indistinct, and the strange chirps emanating from the speakers sent chills down Jennifer's spine. She quickly turned off the radio, feeling more uncomfortable than before. The feeling of being watched began to disturb Jennifer. She shook her head, trying to shake off the paranoia, chalking it up to the darkness and bad weather. But the discomfort persisted, as if something was lurking in the shadows. As she drove down the deserted road, Jennifer spotted something unexpected: a rain-soaked man standing on the side of the road. He was dressed in dark clothes and held a cardboard sign in his hands, on which the word help was written in shaky letters. Jennifer felt sorry for the stranger. She slowed the car and stopped next to him, rolling down the window. Cold wind and rain invaded the vehicle's interior as she asked the man if she needed help. The man nodded, his eyes hidden under the brim of a wet hat. He seemed nervous and reluctant to speak. Jennifer offered him a blanket from the backseat of the car, and he gratefully accepted, thanking her in an inaudible whisper. Jennifer tried to start a conversation to break the ice, asking the man about his destination and why he was alone on that rainy night. However, her answers were evasive, and he seemed suspicious. The man did not mention where he was going or where he was coming from, making the situation even more perplexing. As she drove down the dark road, Jennifer noticed that the man was holding something in his lap, hidden under a wet coat. Curiosity got the better of her, and she asked what he was holding. The man reluctantly revealed a dusty old book with a worn leather cover. He explained that the book had sentimental value to him, and that he was trying to protect it from the rain. The explanation seemed reasonable, but Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The man's strange behavior and his reluctance to make eye contact made her uneasy. She drove faster, eager to get to her destination and get rid of that mystery passenger. However, she was far from imagining what was to come. The journey continued down the dark, rainy road, with Jennifer trying to ignore her growing sense of unease. The strange man beside her remained silent, squinting at her from time to time, his eyes still hidden beneath the brim of his wet hat. Jennifer drove cautiously, maintaining the car's steady speed as her thoughts wandered. She wondered who this man was and what had caused him to be on that lonely road that stormy night. Her focus was divided between the road and the strange passenger. As they advanced through the dark forest, the rain continued to fall with intensity, making visibility increasingly worse. The only source of light was the car's headlight, which cut through the darkness ahead, creating shadows that danced among the trees. It was then that the man next to Jennifer began to mumble incomprehensible words in a foreign language. His tone of voice was agitated and distracting, as if he were speaking to someone who was not present in the car. Jennifer tried not to pay too much attention to the strange words, but the constant murmur disturbed her deeply. Trying to diffuse the tension in the air, Jennifer decided to start a conversation again. She asked the man about his origin and his journey, hoping to get clearer answers. However, the man remained evasive, responding in short sentences and staring out the window, as if he were worried about something outside. The journey continued in this way, with the man alternating between periods of unsettling murmurs and moments of somber silence. Jennifer was beginning to regret her decision to give a stranger a ride that dark, rainy night. Her mind was full of questions and worries, and she longed to reach her destination as quickly as possible. As she drove down the dark road, Jennifer noticed that the man was holding something in her lap, hidden under her wet coat. Curiosity got the better of her again, and she decided to ask again what he was holding. The man reluctantly opened his coat, revealing the old, dusty, leather-bound book. Jennifer looked at the book, surprised at how old and worn it looked. She asked the man about the meaning of the book and why he was so determined to protect it from the rain. The man hesitated for a moment and finally explained that the book was a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation. He would not elaborate, seeming reserved about its importance. As Jennifer listened to the explanation, the feeling that something was deeply wrong only grew. The book seemed to exude an aura of mystery, and the man's behavior increasingly disturbed her. She decided she needed to stay calm. The dark, narrow road stretched out in front of her, and Jennifer knew there was still a long way to go until she reached her parents' town. She continued driving, increasingly determined to reach her destination as quickly as possible and, hopefully, leave behind the strange passenger who made her so uneasy. However, Jennifer had no idea that the night still held sinister and chilling surprises. The rain continued to fall heavily, further obscuring visibility and making the journey increasingly challenging. Jennifer kept her eyes fixed on the road, her hands firmly on the steering wheel, while the strange man next to her remained silent, holding the old leather-bound book in his lap. The tension in the car was palpable, and Jennifer felt like she was in an increasingly uncomfortable situation. The man's constant mumbling in a foreign language made her nervous, and she couldn't understand what he was saying. She was eager to reach her destination and get rid of that strange passenger. The winding road led deeper into the forest, with tall trees that blocked out what little light the moon and stars could provide. The car's headlights cut through the darkness ahead, revealing only patches of wet road and trees that seemed to lean menacingly over the vehicle. Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about those mysterious eyes of the man, which remained hidden under the brim of his hat. She knew something wasn't right, and that she needed to get out of this situation as quickly as possible. The ancient book that the man was holding seemed to be the center of all this mystery, and Jennifer felt that it hid disturbing secrets. As the journey continued, the man's murmuring intensified, becoming more frantic and unsettling. Jennifer couldn't understand a single word he was saying, but the agitation in her voice made her nervous. She tried to ask the man to stop, but he seemed oblivious to her words, as if he were trapped in his own dark world. Fear began to tighten Jennifer's chest. She knew she needed to find a way to get rid of this strange passenger, but the dark, winding road seemed to have no end. Bad weather and relentless rain made driving safely even more difficult. It was then that something happened that made Jennifer's heart race. The man next to her stopped muttering and looked directly at her. His eyes, which had been hidden under the brim of his hat, were now visible and glowed a deep shade of red, like burning embers. Jennifer let out a scream of terror, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The look in those red eyes paralyzed her with fear, and she didn't know what to do. She sped up the car, desperate to get away from the walking nightmare next to her. The man's red eyes continued to shine brightly, giving off an unearthly sense of horror. Jennifer drove at full speed, trying not to look at the man next to her, but the image of those frightening eyes would haunt her for the rest of her life. The winding road seemed to have no end, and Jennifer was determined to get somewhere safe, where she could call for help and get rid of this strange and terrifying passenger. However, the dark, rainy night was far from over, and she still had a long way to go before escaping whatever it was that haunted her that terrible night. Jennifer drove at full speed down the dark road, with the strange passenger still on board. Her heart was beating wildly, and adrenaline coursed through her veins as she desperately tried to get away from that walking nightmare beside her. The man's red eyes continued to shine brightly, emitting an unearthly aura of horror. The winding road seemed to stretch on forever, with the tall, dark trees of the forest closing in around them. The rain continued to fall heavily, making visibility even worse. Jennifer was determined to find help as quickly as possible, but the road was deserted and seemed to lead nowhere. Finally, Jennifer spotted a small sign indicating the presence of a gas station ahead. She saw an opportunity to stop and call the police, hoping that the presence of authorities might help her deal with the strange passenger. Upon arriving at the gas station, Jennifer jumped out of the car and ran toward the convenience store, her eyes wide with terror. She could barely breathe as she begged the dispatcher to call the police immediately. The dispatcher, concerned by Jennifer's desperate appearance, picked up the phone and called authorities. While waiting for the police to arrive, Jennifer watched the strange passenger get out of the car. He remained silent, his red eyes still glowing sinisterly. However, upon seeing the police approaching the gas station, the man seemed to hesitate. The police quickly arrived and approached the strange man, asking him to get out of the car. Jennifer explained the situation to the officers, her voice shaking and her hands shaking with fear. She told of the man's red eyes, his unsettling murmurs, and the ancient book he carried. While being taken into custody, the mysterious man continued to stare at Jennifer with his red eyes, giving off a sense of silent menace. Police officers confiscated the ancient book, which seemed to exude an aura of supernatural mystery. Authorities began an investigation to discover the man's true identity and the sinister nature of the book. Jennifer was relieved to finally be free from the terrifying situation, but the red eyes and the mysterious book continued to haunt her nightmares. As the investigation continued, authorities were unable to determine the true origin or reason behind the man's strange behavior. The ancient book was sent for analysis, but no expert could decipher its contents or meaning. Jennifer put that night of terror behind her, but the memory of the red eyes and the mysterious book would haunt her for the rest of her life. She never took a solitary night trip again, fearing that the unknown might be lurking in the shadows once again. The mystery surrounding that sinister night and its strange passenger was never solved, leaving Jennifer with the unsettling feeling that the supernatural had crossed her path that rainy night. And so, she continued her life, looking over her shoulder into the dark nights, hoping not to meet again the terrifying gaze that would haunt her forever.